It's no secret that I love Pokemon. It's my most streamed game series on Twitch, I've cosplayed both trainers and Pokemon, I have more Absol merch than I can display, and I've been attending midnight releases since Gen 6. But there's more to this story than I've ever fully told, including how I completely misinterpreted Mystery Dungeon as a mainline game, thought Pokemon could have up to 4 types, and how I thought the normal type meant a Pokemon had no type. So let's begin. Pokemon first appeared on my radar in about 2009. I just started hanging out with a new group of people and a lot of them were into Pokemon, and trying to fit in, I looked into it as well. It didn't make a whole lot of sense at the beginning, but I thought it was fun to come up with Fakemon. The first one I created was a rabbit that I recall being a Psychic, Ice, Grass, and Dark type. I'd love to see the weakness chart for that one. It didn't take long for me to drop 2 of the types, and I remember being a bit embarrassed about not knowing they could have only 2, but that nicely sums up how much I really knew going into my first game. At some point, I was at a second-hand trader and found a copy of Mystery Dungeon Red. I recognised that it was a Pokemon game, but hadn't actually heard of it before, so I asked Mum to buy it for me. I didn't have a Game Boy, but I did have a DS Lite, that until that point was basically just a Nintendogs machine. I booted the game, was assigned Cyndaquil, and chose Skitty as my partner, purely because it's a pink cat. I fell in love with these two and made sure I ended up with them again when I played the remakes. Luckily, I was assigned Cyndaquil again, so I guess some things never change. Mystery Dungeon was the first time I encountered the undisputed best Pokemon in existence, Absol. I was completely enamored by that creature, and to this day, it's still my favourite. While some have come close, honourable mentions to Lunala, nothing will change that. I never questioned that in Mystery Dungeon you are the Pokemon. I don't think I'd got to the point of learning about battles or actual game mechanics, so I just assumed this was it. This was Pokemon. You are the creatures and you explore dungeons. It seemed pretty straightforward. Once I'd finished the game, I looked into the post-game content and became obsessed with recruiting every legendary. I spent months trying to find Mew, and to this day, I haven't so much as seen it. I at least knew that Mew was super rare, so finding it would be very impressive. I had no idea Mystery Dungeon was a spin-off until I heard some new games were coming out, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. On release day, I was homesick, but managed to convince my dad to take me to Target to pick up a copy. I didn't really understand why there were 2 different games, but I liked the look of Lugia, so I chose Soul Silver. I also got both guidebooks, thinking they'd help, and I was right. Since then, I've put hundreds of hours into Soul Silver, and I can't even begin to describe how much I love that game. It does feel weird saying that considering I've actually only played it once, but I couldn't bring myself to reset the file and start again. That said, I am totally prepared to replay through with a full team, and not just solo with Typhlosion. I got my money's worth out of those guidebooks too. Or rather my parents' money's worth. They're pretty tattered and worn, but I would have been completely lost without them. Soul Silver started me on a path of becoming completely absorbed in Pokemon content. I started buying trading cards, merchandise, and every game I could get my hands on. I also got really into Pokemon content online. I don't remember exactly whose videos I was watching, but I really enjoyed battles and shiny hunting in particular. This was back when the only decently well-known shiny hunting method was Masuda, but I was really interested in different methods that popped up later on. I'll come back to this. I was really inspired by people who posted Pokemon content online and decided to try and make my own. A few things to note. In 2009, I was barely a teenager and stricken with awful stage fright. I'd panic if too many people looked at me, let alone a crowd of any description. The idea of public speaking scared me so much that to this day, I'm surprised I thought making videos for the internet was a good idea. I also had no experience with video editing, but loved filming and had my own camcorder. I thought that with that, and Windows Movie Maker, I was pretty well equipped to make videos. So I sat down in front of the TV, set up my camcorder and booted up Battle Revolution. Got into a Wi-Fi battle, hit record, and said absolutely nothing. Not a thing. I let the entire battle run out while I sat there in stunned silence. The whole time I just couldn't speak, even though I'd been so excited about the idea of making videos. Honestly, I don't know what else I expected, and I don't think I tried again. I just accepted I wouldn't be able to talk and threw that idea out the window. For years after that, I watched as Pokemon-based creators soared to popularity and cursed myself for not being able to talk in front of the camera. I got the idea in my head that if I'd been able to make videos back then, I'd be popular now, but that really isn't the case. Even if I had spoken, I'd still have used Movie Maker to do my editing, and considering it was filmed on a camcorder, the quality would have been terrible, probably 480p at most. I'm not even sure that teenage me had anything interesting to say outside of commentating word for word what was happening in the battle. I'm sure I would have grown into talking about other topics, but in retrospect, I think it was a good thing I never uploaded any videos online. One site I did get quite involved with as a teen was DeviantArt, and there I faced so much bullying I purged my account after 2 years. I say purged because I deleted everything before deactivating. I didn't want any traces of my art to be left because I felt ashamed. I decided to start completely fresh. If I'd put my actual voice and personality out there and got that reception, I think I would have been discouraged from ever posting anything online again. Before I move on from the topic of DeviantArt, I need to talk about some of the old drawings and stories I uploaded there. Around the time I was getting into Pokemon, I was also getting into Vocaloid, and I drew a few illustrations of various Vocaloids as Pokemon Jijinkas. I specifically remember drawing the Kakamine twins as Plusle and Minun, and Haku Yorbain as Gothitelle. I do really want to redraw those someday. The biggest piece of Pokemon fan media I produced, however, was a fanfiction set in what I recall was Hoenn. It was called Pokemon Spy Squad and followed protagonist Mina as she worked for her father's spy agency alongside her sister and a childhood friend. I wish I could provide any information about the plot, but unfortunately, soon after I purged my account, my laptop battery stopped working, and still feeling it was a good idea to get rid of my old work, I didn't make copies of anything before tossing the laptop. I can talk about the characters though. Mina's main partner Pokemon was either Milotic or Umbreon, I can't recall which. She entered contests but was really a tomboy and climbed trees. Because that's what defines a tomboy, their ability to climb trees. Her sister Missy was a ghost-type enthusiast who I believe specialised in battling. She was goth and her partner was a Mismagius. Finally, the boy. I think his name was Jack and I can't remember a single thing about him other than that he wore a hat. At some point, a half-human, half-Lucario named Alaria joined the party, and there was a half-Haxorus named Akane somewhere in there. I know they could use attacks like regular Pokemon, but were basically just Nekomimi versions of their respective monsters. Chances are that was my early, unrealised obsession with monster girls emerging for the first time. I think at one stage I tried to write a Spy Squad / Team Rocket crossover, but I don't recall ever finishing or posting it anywhere. Leaving DeviantArt didn't discourage me from Pokemon though, and it continued to become a bigger and bigger part of my life. Generation 5 is still hands down my favourite, and by Generation 6 I was going to midnight releases for new games. My friends and I would pile into a train for over 2 hours to get to the city and have to stay the night because we'd be there well after the last train had left. I had so much fun at those events and have really fond memories of the Sun and Moon release at Federation Square. We were sitting really close to the stage and watched the same 3 trailers loop for hours, but there was a mini Smash tournament and someone showed up in a Lunala Jijinka cosplay that lit up. It was super cool and low-key inspired my graduates range. Over the years, I've amassed quite the collection of merchandise. I've been lucky enough to have a few friends go to actual Pokemon centres and bring me back treats, including one time a friend didn't know what my favourite Pokemon was but bought an Absol because it reminded her of me. To be fair, I did have an Absol fringe back in the day, but the fact that she happened to pick up my favourite out of hundreds of creatures was simply incredible. I've also got plushies of Mega and Ditto Absol, and I love both to bits. Another highlight of my collection is the Swing Vignette Chandelure, which I was lucky enough to get in my first box. One bit of merchandise I've had a rocky relationship with is my TCG collection. I used to be way into cards, but as I got older and money became tighter, I stopped buying them altogether. I ended up selling my entire collection, knowing if I kept any, I'd be tempted to buy more. It wouldn't be until 2021, when Celebrations released, that I'd go completely feral for the cards featuring Lily, and I did end up buying the Cosmog, Cosmoem, and Lunala trio. There have been a few cards that almost got me back in, but the investment is too high and the market too feral. In Gen 6, I got into methods shiny hunting, starting with chain fishing. My first shiny was a Dragonair, and I consider myself very lucky to have found such a stellar shiny right off the bat. The chain wasn't even that high from memory. I don't think I'd got past 50 before he showed up. I got really into SOS chaining in Gen 7, sometimes chaining multiple shinies in a day. I'd finished school at that point and had a lot of spare time for that kind of thing. Highlights include my Feebas, Vikavolt, Sarina, and Rockruff. I've failed my fair share as well, including a Palisand I reclaimed in the next generation. When Gen 8 arrived, I had so many fresh methods to try, and learning the tricks definitely helped me get through the boredom of lockdown. That, and completing a living dex to get the shiny charm. I know I didn't have to make it a living dex, but I accidentally missuited a shiny Grookey while I was at it. Definitely worth the effort just for that little guy. Thanks to lockdown and some very slow months, I started majorly multitasking to keep my brain active, drawing, shiny hunting, and watching videos at the same time. This will be important later. It would be quite a number of years before I'd upload my voice to the internet. The first instance I can remember would have been at the end of 2020 when I started creating vlogs for my business. At that point, I'd completely conquered my stage fright and rarely got nervous before being in front of a crowd or a camera. I'll save that story for another video, but trust me when I say it's a wild ride. One thing that did happen after I established my own confidence was I started to like the sound of my own voice, which I know is an incredibly egotistic thing, but it's the reason I'm able to make videos like this now. Jump to 2021, 12 years after my initial attempt at being a Poketuber, when I started streaming art on Twitch. At this point, I'd made a few YouTube videos alongside my business vlogs, but nothing major. My Twitch was growing steadily, and to try and bring in more viewers, I decided to do something I'd already been doing throughout lockdown: drawing and playing Pokemon at the same time. Turns out that kind of novelty goes over pretty well, and soon enough Pokemon became a regular part of my streams. Specifically, shiny hunting. My first target was Lunala through Dynamax Adventures, not only because it was a shiny I really wanted, but because the raids don't require a whole lot of attention. I phased quite a few times before Lunala came home, and would create a highlight on Twitch whenever I found a shiny. It took me longer than it should have to realise I should be uploading those clips to YouTube as well, so I branched out and started creating highlights of anything I thought was cool or interesting. Uploading my first Pokemon-focused highlight to YouTube reminded me of that day I tried to make my first video. Although it was a fleeting dream, teenage me didn't really have aspirations or goals, so I think they'd be really excited to know at least one of the things they wanted to do, even if they only thought it for a week, has become a reality. This was cemented further when I was given an overseas event code by a very generous viewer. I'd seen lots of Aussie Poketubers be given overseas codes by fans, but I never expected it would happen to me. I'm even expanding my Pokemon content on Twitch to include challenge runs like Nuzlocke. I'm still amazed that something teenage me picked up because my friends played it is still such a massive part of my life. There's a few things I stay genuinely and consistently invested in, but Pokemon has a very special place in my heart, and I will forever get excited about new games and shiny hunting methods. I've dedicated a massive amount of energy to learning how to draw Pokemon, which is where this speed paint comes from. I wanted to push myself to draw something focused on composition and the relationship between poses, and thought an homage to my shiny Lunala Arcturus was the perfect subject matter. I actually went on to create an outfit based on the one in this drawing for a costume party, which I attended dressed as Jijinka Cosmog. I have plans for more Pokemon costumes, including finishing my Crystal cosplay and a Darkrai Jijinka. I have a lot of fun interpreting Pokemon as Jijinkas or as outfits, and I really want to do more of it. And that's how I kind of became a Poketuber. Although I don't think I'll ever use the label of myself outside this video, it's nice to reflect on stories like this. I've come super far since my teenage years, and to think I'm now running my own business is obscenely cool. For a kid who had no aspirations, I'd say I'm doing pretty well for myself. For those who've watched until the end, I've got some Easter eggs about this illustration. The idea came to me when I was working on a trio of prints all focused on Tensei, the character, as a way to push parts of illustration and rendering I wasn't confident with. The first illustration was supposed to be Tensei in a bottle, but when the idea to draw them with Arcturus hit me, I completely derailed and finished this before I'd even sketched the other two prints. While I was working on it, I decided to colour Tensei's dress with Lunala's original colour palette, which coincidentally is a perfect contrast to its shiny. I used those colours and the basic shapes from the outfit to design my Cosmog Jijinka, which also has a big skirt and chiffon overlays. I love how this piece turned out so much, I've started replacing a lot of my old social media imagery with it, and started offering a new style of commission based on its popularity. That was also a great excuse to draw more Pokemon. One thing I find really funny about this piece is I just went and drew self-insert fan art with a relatively hard to get shiny Pokemon. I could have done this without having caught Arcturus as an homage to my favourite legendary, but I've specifically noted on a few occasions that the Lunala in this drawing is Arcturus. Not even the Spy Squad story had a self-insert, because my Pokesona was an Absol Jijinka named Nightclaw. Maybe one day I'll do a big showcase of my old Pokemon art because it's really something. You can tell I was a self-proclaimed edgy teen just by looking at Nightclaw. Unfortunately, the name stuck, and even now, in my mid-20s, I call my Absols Nightclaw. Don't at me, it's a good name. And that's a wrap on my Pokemon journey so far. It's safe to say Pokemon won't be leaving my radar for a long time, if it ever does. But as long as they keep designing Pokemon like Poltegeist, I'm going to keep buying the games. It's funny to think that I asked my mum to buy my first ever Pokemon game because I happened across it, and years later I asked my mum to buy me a Switch after it was announced the next mainline game wouldn't be released on DS. My one hope for the future of Pokemon games is that when they inevitably remake Gen 5, they do it with the love and care it deserves. A true remake, not just a visual upgrade. Until next time, take care.